You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Work It podcast. It's me, Tiffany, and my wise co-host, Gerald. So, Gerald, every day we get a lot of emails in our newsroom, mostly asking if we are keen to interview someone. But one really stood out to me recently. It's a story of a nurse manager who was at the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic, taking care of critically ill patients. Now, to be honest, we also get a lot of these kind of stories. There will be people who will say that, okay, this person contributed a lot. Would you be interested to talk to that person? But I think what really stood out for me was that this nurse manager was recognized not just for his contributions as a nurse, but for his exceptional interpersonal skills.
Very interesting, because we would imagine that for nurses, it would be like helping skills or clinician skills,
yes.
But communication skills?
Yeah, I didn't really think that it was something that was so much needed in the hospital.
Actually, for many of us, when we look at the term communication skills, I think it's still very broad. It means a lot of things, and I know on resumes and in job descriptions, that's one of the keywords that always appears.
Yeah.
So what does this communication skills really look like? Maybe in a project management perspective, it's about coordination, about command and control. Maybe in terms of sales, it's about influencing, presenting, selling effectively to people.
Yeah.
In a newsroom, how does communication look like?
I think communication in a newsroom is everything. Our job is to make sense of the world and explain it to the audience. And I think not just that, but if you worked a day here in this newsroom, you realize that every job is part of a wider team effort. But I think when you're in a hospital, faced with life and death situations, and then you have very anxious family members surrounding you, what does good communication mean? Not just for your job, but for the family members.
So let's find out. Today we have Patrick Lin, Senior Nurse Manager from Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me over here this morning.
Patrick, so I personally have had a few hospital stays, okay? And I witnessed family members, as I mentioned, who can be actually pretty rude and unkind to nurses. So for example, they order you around, ask you to refill their tissue paper, top up the hot water in the room. In those moments, right, as a nurse, right, how do you respond?
I think when one receives such requests from our family members or really anyone, maybe even our patients, or it could even be a colleague on the healthcare team, there's often something underlying. There's something they're really trying to tell us. Maybe it could be, hey, I don't know enough of my family member's condition. I want to know what is happening. And because I don't know enough, the best that I could do now is to attend to other things, making sure that the tissue papers get stocked, making sure that the water jug gets filled. Attending to their immediate needs is still pretty important. Yeah, if they want a piece of tissue paper, get them that piece of tissue paper. But I will also say, let's take another step and really engage the family member. Take a step to ask them, how are you coping today? What do you understand about your loved one's condition? Is there something that I can help you with? Is there any area that you need a little bit more information? Is it regarding the hospitalization bills, or is it anything about the medications that I could perhaps direct you to someone that could be even more helpful? I think this goes a very long way to a family member who's quite anxious.
I hear what Patrick is saying here is that he's actually looking through the behavior of the rudeness or the emotional side, and he's really getting to the root of what are you asking for, what do you need?
Yeah.
And how can I help you with that? And it takes a lot to reach that space, right?
I think so.
Because you got to look past whatever you're seeing here, you got to look past that and to really stay very professional, to really understand, hear what they really need and address it. Yeah, I can imagine like for one person it's like this, but how about if it's like a lot of cases like that at the same time? I'm talking like maybe during the time of COVID, like it's a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Things were changing so fast. There were so many things happening on the ground simultaneously. Then how would communication on that level look like?
I think during a crisis situation, communication rely on 3 key tenets. I would say the first one would be clarity. If you want to say something, if you want to communicate to someone in a high-stake environment, high-pressure environment, no one has time to decode your message. When I start off my career in the ICU, when a patient collapses or what we call like a code blue situation, you wouldn't go around to say that, oh, could you perhaps start CPR?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would say,
do it. You
start
have to do
CPR.
it. Yes.
And it makes a lot of difference. People get what you're trying to tell them and people can do it. And I think that's important. That's clarity. And the second thing I think would be calmness. In a high-stakes situation, in a crisis, emotions definitely will flare. And your tone really sets the tone for the conversation and the communication. But the interesting thing is that during a crisis situation, people tend to talk very fast.
Voice a bit higher.
Yes,
as well.
exactly. And the orders get fast and furious, and then you need to...
And look at your eyes right now. Your eyes very big right now.
I'm looking at you right now.
Yeah, very scary.
Interestingly, I think during a crisis, what could really help is if people just slow down and take meaningful pauses like this. Yeah. And sometimes silence gets so much louder than all the words and it covers out all the noise. And that's what you may want your team to really focus on during a crisis. And the last one I would think is perhaps respect. No matter you're talking to, say, a junior nurse, a health attendant, or even a head of department, I think respect goes a very long way. And that respect really sets the stage up for people to speak up when something's go wrong. That kind of psychological safety is very important, and I think we need to really cultivate that kind of awareness among our team members.
Okay, how does respect look like if I were to expand on that example you gave earlier on about the CPR thing? You say, okay, you do CPR right now. And then the junior nurse goes, I don't know what to do. And then after that, you turn to the next person and say, you. And then the other person's also, I'm freaking out. Of course, this is a very hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen in our hospitals. At this present moment, you don't have a team who can be as calm and clear as you, but you have a job at hand, right? So how do you communicate that in a very respectful way?
I think in a situation, we definitely would be able to find certain tasks for every individual. And I think looking at a Code Blue situation, we do have multiple roles available. Yeah. So I think it really goes down to delegating the correct person for the correct job.
So it's about knowing the people in the team, right? I think it's a very real situation, Tiffany, that you brought up, that not everybody works in a high-performing team, and there are people who don't pull their weight. There are maybe even you wonder about their competency. When then in a crisis moment, you have to tap on them, but yet they cannot perform. So I think what Patrick says here is pretty good.
Yeah.
Look for some other angles to work with them.
One thing that Patrick said was really interesting, and I thought about it. Did you learn all these things on the job, or did someone train you? Like this whole idea of being clear, being calm and being respectful.
Yeah.
Did you learn this on the job?
I think it's a combination. We do learn this on the job through various situations. Like, for example, for all our nurses, we do send them for training on how to respond to a Code Blue situation. And in a Code Blue situation, we say that we do need a nurse in charge or like a more senior nurse to kind of like lead and coordinate the nursing response to that. And a key function of this nurse in charge or the senior nurse would be to delegate and communicate and direct the resuscitation. But another thing that I thought would be quite interesting is, as a profession, I think nurses, we are very deep listeners. I would credit that to our close proximity to our patients. We hear about their life, their joy, their pain, and everything in between. And I think over time, we read the room very well and we sense the room very well. We are able to understand and have a pretty good guess on what people really want and what people are really trying to tell us. So I think that being a nurse, we get that soft skill.
It's like the nurse whisperer. She gets them. Like what you're not saying or what you're saying, they know.
Yeah, they can read the room. What I think you have just talked about is the idea of non-verbal cues, which I think is a very big part of communication. When you have to have a difficult conversation with maybe a patient or someone on your staff, how do you have this conversation? How do you rehearse for this conversation, knowing that maybe your non-verbal cues might be saying things opposite of what your words are saying?
That's so interesting. Communication, when we talk about communication, we always think about is the spoken words. But really, the non-spoken words or the non-verbal words, they really play a big part as well. I remember when I had a difficult conversation with one of my staff members. We had to issue a performance improvement plan for this staff member. And I still remember one day before I had to issue this improvement plan to this staff, I was actually rehearsing how should I approach it, how should I tell her, how should I be sitting, should I be standing, which degree should I angle my chair at, things like that. And really, I think at the end of the day is when we have that kind of conversation with her, I think what is important is, one, we let her know what is this conversation really about, because no one really enjoys having a hard conversation or difficult conversation. And the second one would be, we want you to improve, and how could we do it? And the last thing would be to end it off with support. And this is a bit delicate because people, especially the person that you're having this conversation with, can get very cynical or even patronizing you. You're just trying to you're saying it because for the sake of saying it. Yeah, but this is so important. By offering support, you keep communications open. And I believe that if you are genuine about lending support to your staff, they will feel it too. Yeah.
Also, when you mentioned about the rehearsal that you did, tell us a bit more about that.
How do you even know about these things?
I guess I started off with imagining how I would want my manager or my leader to be having this conversation with me if I am the one that's receiving this difficult conversation, if I'm the one that's receiving this improvement plan. I would want my manager to be factual. I would want my manager to be empathetic to me as well. And lastly, I also want my manager to be able to, hey, let's move on from this, let's improve and then let's move on.
I think putting yourself in the shoes of the recipient is pretty useful. I'm wondering, besides the content itself, were there things that you also deliberately, intentionally did, like maybe what you wore? When you look at yourself in rehearse, were there certain expressions that you were trying to put forward, smiling or stern? What did you have to practice?
I think it's more of a mixture of a bit of everything. Like when we open up the conversation, when we first open up the conversation, it could be a little bit more serious. Hey, we are having this conversation because we notice that there's a pattern of, let's just say, for example, our works get turned in late. And we want to find out a little bit more. We want to understand a little bit more what's going on. But I won't be saying things like, oh, you're such a problematic staff.
And you should also come with data, right? You should come with evidence as well. You're saying this statement, but you need to say, okay, at this point we have evidence to back why we are saying what we are saying.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of trying to be objective, trying to look very professional, that you're there not to be their friend, but you're just there to really do a job that you have, which is to be a good supervisor, to investigate and to help the person.
Yeah. But I guess towards the end of the conversation, if the staff member is receptive, I guess the stance would generally be a bit more toned down to one that becomes a bit more empathetic. I want to help you improve. How can we do it together? How can we rebase our clinical practice to make you become a better staff member in future? Yeah.
So a lot of that, all that sounds very being nice and being relatable, which I think is the basic essential tenet of being a good communicator. But how much of being a good communicator is also about being firm and saying no about certain things? Because I can imagine, like we mentioned, in a very high stakes environment, I think there will warrant some situations where you might hurt people's feelings. You might make them feel in that point of time very defensive. So how much of that would you say is also part of your job as a good communicator?
Yeah, I think making difficult decisions definitely come into play. And it could be communicating unpleasant news and being firm and standing your ground on certain decisions that you have made. And I think that does come in, that definitely have to come in. And I think at the end of the day, you will rely back on the set of principles. I'm making this set of decisions that you may not like it, but it's based on these principles. And these principles will stand and apply to everyone on the team. It's not just specific to you, it's really for everyone. And this set of principles, we will not adjust it unless situations change. Yeah, I think applying this consistency to all the staff will help to set the tone. Yeah.
So if they disagree and things get emotional, then what do you do? How do you de-escalate the situation?
Some could see the reasons why these decisions were made. Others may not. And I think it's perfectly normal. Yeah, we just have to let them process it and let them understand why this decision will still have to be made and why these decisions will still have to be followed. Yeah, for that one or two staff members who may not still buy in, continued engagement will go a long way. If they can't accept it after some time, it might be worthwhile to revisit this again with them and see whether would they be able to understand how these decisions were being made in the first place. Whether is there any other alternative that they may find palatable to them. Yeah.
It helps that in such situations that the communication is firm, because if you're communicating something not so positive, you don't want to give the other person some idea that you can sway, or you don't be sending mixed signals across. I'm speaking from experiences, seeing how retrenchment notices were given to people. So you can see the person sitting in front of you literally crumbling. And all you can do is to be professional, to say that this is what it is. Because after you deliver such a message, nothing you say can make them feel better. Nothing. It's about giving them the time and the space to process, and then checking on them after that again will be very helpful.
Yeah. Now, if I move on from managing your own teams to hiring someone. So if you had to hire someone to be an effective communicator working in a very high stakes environment, what will you look out for and how do you assess whether this person has these skills?
I would want to assess for how well of a listener they are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So your good communication skill starts with listening. That's your first step.
That's
Okay, tell me
like
more.
the input, right?
Yeah,
That's
tell
like
me more.
input.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I think when we talk about listening, people will think, are you trying to listen to respond or are you trying to listen to understand? Yeah, and if you are trying to listen to respond, you may not really truly get what the other party is trying to tell you. What you respond could be different to what the other party might be expecting. But if you listen to understand and you take your time to think about what this person is trying to tell us, what this person really needs, then I think it changes the game because you would know how to be able to respond appropriately to this stuff. So I would think first off, listening skills. Yeah.
And how would you, if I push you a little bit more, how would you assess for their listening skills? What kind of questions would you ask or what might you do?
Talk a lot, see whether they are listening, and then say, summarize what I just said.
The AI could do that now.
Exactly.
I have had the privilege to sit in a few interviews, and I find that what would be quite helpful would be getting the candidate to share what do they think about this interview. How do you think this conversation went? And if they have been listening to this conversation, they will be able to tell you like, oh, where's my sensing? Where do I place myself? And I think that would be quite helpful. Yeah, that's a quite interesting way.
It's like a competency-based assessment, right? Like you are testing the person, like this whole thing, how do you feel about your chances after this interview, right? I think you also test, by that, you're actually trying to test whether the person was able to read the room, read you well enough as an interviewer. So I think that's a good one.
But I also have been in interviews where I get mixed signals for both interviewers. One person's, yeah, no, these are great answers. And then the other person just looks like they didn't want to be there.
Sometimes
I
right
think it's
in
the
interview.
good cop, black cop thing.
Yes, it happens.
So you're also sending mixed signals.
Yes.
So how am I going to assess my own listening skills? I get really confused.
So I think
you gaslight me.
So, so I think from this, I'm just seeing it as that Patrick would want to know like what's the thinking process behind it. Yeah. And if the person is intentionally mixed signals, then the person also looks a little bit confused, tentative, then you maybe know that's a correct response lah. Yeah.
I think today, even though we talked about your experience within the hospital, I think a lot of things we can also learn even outside of the hospital. Things like listening skills being actually the first thing you will look out for in a good communicator, because unless you listen, you won't be able to start the conversation at the same level that you are having with this person, right? So I think that's something that I definitely have learned. I think I will look out for people like that, because before this, I always thought a good communicator is somebody who can sell their idea. But sometimes I feel like talking to people who are very good at selling their idea, I get very tired, because it feels like at the end of the whole conversation, I'm like, wow, this person just barreled through their way, like bulldozed their way. And at the end of the day, I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like I want to be part of their team.
I think hearing from Patrick reminds me that it's a two-way process as well. And also it's about the verbal, the non-verbal. For different kinds of conversations, you need to have different stance. Importantly, it's to where communication seems almost impossible because of emotions or difficulties, it's important to stay very objective, drill through to see what is really the question or the need at hand and address it. So thank you, Patrick, for being with us today.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on our Ask Me Anything segment. If you have a question that you're struggling with at work and don't know who to ask, send to us. Perhaps we may be able to help you. Now, today's question was sent in by our listener, Pauline. Here's what she wrote. What can I do when my company delays my salary? Mine has been late more than once. The last few times, my boss told me it was a delay with the bank. I did get my salary in the end, but this time he's saying that there are problems with liquidity. My friends are telling me that I need to jump off this sinking ship before I drown with it. But my boss seems like a nice person. Is the only option to report him?
Wow, I think recently we've been hearing a lot about employers not paying salary. Yeah.
So there was Jollibee staff who alleged that they were not paid their salaries and CPF contributions after a few outlets were suddenly closed. Then in June, workers at Tech TV Network told our CNA reporter that they stopped receiving their salaries. One person said he was not paid for more than 8 months.
Oh my goodness, how can you survive without salary for 8 months.
Yeah.
And you really wonder, like, why would someone allow their pay to be withheld for such a long time?
Maybe they're just hanging on to the hope, I guess. But I think one thing that we want to also say is that, Pauline, employers actually must pay your salary within 7 days after the end of the salary period. That is by law.
Also, if today any of you are getting your salary withheld for more than 7 days, please start to do something. Don't buy into the promises your employer is feeding you.
What should they do? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I think you could report your employer to the TADAM, all right, the Tripartite Alliance for Dispute Management. That's the first place to go for all these salary disagreements. There's a quiz and an online calculator there, so you can compute how much you can claim, whether are you eligible for claims. If you're a union member, you can also approach your union for help.
Yeah. And I think also make sure that there is a proper documentation that, okay, you have approached the boss for your salary, screenshot those, keep those, because I think all these things will actually help when you go to TADAM.
Yes, correct. That's part of the investigation, right? So take the screenshot, very important because you can delete the messages sometimes.
Yes.
And then if, let's say, the conversation is verbal, just maybe get something in writing, ask the person to put it to you in the email or even as a message, right? If the employer is genuine about it, you shouldn't have anything to hide, right?
But if they are just stringing them along, it will be good to at least even get some form of text messages. You can also even print out your pay slip to show that maybe they paid up to a certain month and then after that it was like maybe a few months of not being paid out, or there is a track record of the salary being paid inconsistently. Your pay slip will probably be able to show that.
Yeah, but there are deadlines as well.
Yeah, that's what we found out too.
So if you want to do something about reporting, please don't wait too long.
You must file your claim within 1 year from your first date of owed salary. That's if you are still employed. But if you already left the job, you must file your claim within 6 months of your last day of employment. So make sure that you adhere to these timelines because this will really help you to try and expedite your complaints.
I think the sooner you do it, maybe the chances of getting back your unpaid salaries could be higher a little bit.
Yeah,
because when it comes to payment of the company's debt, let's say the company is in liquidation, wages actually do sit quite highly on the priority list to be cleared. So if your claim is there, then perhaps it'll be cleared earlier.
But I guess if the company goes into liquidation, even though the wages sit high on the priority list, if the company has no assets left after paying off their liquidation fees, then unfortunately no salaries can be paid. But I think going back to Pauline, there are limits of how much you can claim. So don't let the unpaid salaries pile up. And again, you can use the calculator that Gerald spoke about earlier on to see how much you can get back.
Yeah, Pauline also mentioned that her boss seems like a nice person. I don't know, empathy, just because you think your boss is nice, should you allow that to become a factor accepting delays in your salary? I don't think so.
No, because your salary is your right. You need to get paid for what you have already done. So don't let your empathy get in the way.
Yeah, if this has happened more than once, then better do the correct thing to report and then start looking out. Really start looking out for something else because you don't want to be caught in the situation where suddenly you turn up at work, the doors are locked and the shutters are down. And you don't know where your boss is anymore.
Yeah. So Pauline, I hope that, what we have said here will give you some clarity and also strength to take the next step. And if, like Pauline, you have a work-related question that you think we can help, do write into us. We are at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Me Listen, and YouTube, where a video version of this is at. The team behind the Work It podcast is Ho Pei Ning, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Saya Win, Alison Jenner, Nat Fetavero, and Shaza Dalila. Video by Hanida Amin.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Tiffany. Remember that delayed or unpaid wages should never be part of the job description.